The rain was falling so hard that morning it felt like the sky itself was breaking apart, and Daniel Mercer knew, as he looked at the clock glowing 8:47 a.m. on his dashboard, that he was about to lose everything. He had already used his final warning. One more late arrival, and the job that kept food on his daughter's plate and light in their small apartment would be gone. But as he stood there on the shoulder of a lonely highway, soaked to the bone, staring at a terrified pregnant woman clutching her stomach beside a stalled car, before we go any further, if you believe that kindness still matters in this world, that doing the right thing should never be punished, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that compassion can change everything. Daniel had not planned to stop. He had seen the car ahead pulled to the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. He had hesitated. His phone showed 3 missed reminders from work. His manager's warning from last week still echoed in his mind. As a single father, he did not have the luxury of mistakes. But then he saw her. She was leaning against the driver's side door, both hands wrapped around her swollen belly, her face pale and twisted with pain. Rain plastered her hair to her cheeks. The highway was nearly empty except for a few trucks speeding past, sending waves of water splashing onto the gravel. She looked small against the vast gray sky and utterly alone. Daniel thought of his daughter, Lily, who was 8 years old and terrified of thunderstorms. He thought of the day his wife had gone into labor years ago, the panic in her eyes, the fear that something might go wrong. He remembered how helpless he had felt. And without thinking further, he pulled over. The woman's voice trembled as she explained that her car had overheated and died. Her phone battery was dead. She had been driving back from a prenatal appointment when the pain began. She didn't know if it was labor or something worse. She kept apologizing as though needing help was something shameful. Daniel took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The rain soaked through his shirt instantly, but he didn't care. He helped her into his truck, turned the heater on full blast, and called emergency services. The operator told him it would take at least 20 minutes for an ambulance to reach them due to the storm and distance from town. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. The woman winced, gripping the dashboard. Daniel knelt in front of her in the cramped cab, speaking softly, trying to keep her breathing steady. He told her about Lily, about how scared he had been when she was born. He tried to make her smile, and for a moment, through the pain, she did. When the ambulance finally arrived, Daniel followed it all the way to the hospital to ensure she was admitted safely. He waited until a nurse confirmed she was stable before leaving. By then, it was nearly 10 a.m. He drove to work knowing exactly what would happen. Daniel worked as a maintenance supervisor for a large corporate headquarters in the city. It was a massive glass building owned by a powerful privately held conglomerate known for efficiency and ruthless performance standards. He had worked there for 5 years, never once asking for special treatment, never once using his single-parent status as an excuse. But that morning, as he walked into the building dripping rainwater onto polished marble floors, he saw the look in his manager's eyes before a single word was spoken. Human Resources called him in by noon. The conversation was short. Company policy was clear. He had been warned twice before for tardiness related to Lily's school emergencies and childcare issues. This was the third violation. It did not matter why he was late. Policy did not bend for stories. Daniel tried to explain, not in a pleading way, but calmly. He described the stranded woman. He described the storm. He said he would accept a dock day's pay, a probation period, anything. But the HR representative simply slid a termination document across the desk with rehearsed sympathy. By 2p. Daniel was packing his tools into a cardboard box. He sat in his truck afterwards, staring at the steering wheel. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy and colorless. He thought about Lily's upcoming school field trip fee he hadn't paid yet. He thought about rent. He thought about the promise he had made to himself after his wife passed away from a sudden illness 3 years ago. That Lily would never feel unstable or unsafe. He felt like he had failed her. That evening, he told Lily the truth in the simplest way he could. He explained that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't immediately bring rewards. She listened quietly, her wide eyes serious beyond her years. Then she hugged him and said she was proud of him. It was the first time that day Daniel allowed himself to cry. The next morning, he began searching for work. He sent out applications, updated his resume, called old contacts. Days passed, savings dwindled. The job market was tight. Rejections arrived with sterile politeness. Daniel remained outwardly strong for Lily, but at night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how close they were to losing their apartment. A week later, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. At first, he assumed it was another recruiter rejection. But the voice on the other end was warm, composed, and strangely familiar. It took him a moment to place it. It was the woman from the highway. She told him she had delivered a healthy baby boy 2 days after their encounter. There had been complications, and doctors later said that arriving at the hospital when she did likely prevented a far more dangerous situation. She had asked hospital staff to track down the man who had brought her in, but in the chaos she hadn't gotten his full name. Eventually, through security footage in the ambulance report, she found him. Daniel felt relief wash over him. Knowing she and the baby were safe made the loss of his job sting a little less. Then she said something that made his heart stop. She explained that she was the sole owner and CEO of the very company that had just fired him. Daniel thought he had misheard her, but she continued calmly. She had been returning from visiting a new branch location when her car broke down. She rarely revealed her identity in public, preferring anonymity during routine travel. She had no idea that the man who helped her was one of her own employees until she requested a background check out of gratitude. When she saw his termination file, she was stunned. Company policy had been applied without context. No one had escalated the situation. No one had asked what kind of employee he had been for 5 years. His performance reviews were excellent. His record was clean except for minor tardiness incidents tied to childcare emergencies. She asked him to come to the headquarters the next morning. Daniel walked into the same building where he had been dismissed days earlier, but this time he was escorted to the executive floor. The elevator ride felt unreal. He wore his only suit, slightly worn at the cuffs. His hands trembled. When he stepped into the CEO's office, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The woman stood near the window, holding a small, framed photo of her newborn son. There was no dramatic confrontation, no anger, just quiet clarity. She told Daniel that companies often speak about values, integrity, responsibility, humanity, but those words mean nothing if policies are enforced without compassion. She admitted that she had become so focused on expansion and profit margins that she had allowed systems to operate without heart. She thanked him not only for saving her life and her child's life, but for reminding her what kind of leader she wanted to be. Then she did something Daniel never expected. She offered him his job back with a promotion. Not as a maintenance supervisor, but as director of facilities operations with flexible scheduling and a seat on a newly formed ethics and employee care committee. She wanted someone who understood responsibility beyond spreadsheets. She wanted someone who would advocate for parents, caregivers, and employees facing real-life challenges. Daniel was speechless. The news spread quickly through the company. Policies were revised to include emergency discretion clauses. A support fund for single parents was established. Managers underwent training focused on empathy-based leadership. What had started as one rainy morning act of kindness began reshaping corporate culture from the inside out. For Daniel, the transformation was not just professional, it was personal. His financial stability returned, but more importantly, his faith in doing the right thing was restored. Lily watched her father walk into work each day with quiet pride, knowing that he had not sacrificed his values for security. Months later, the CEO invited Daniel and Lily to the company's annual gathering. Standing on stage, she shared the story of a storm, a highway, and a man who chose compassion over convenience. She did not glorify him. She simply said that leadership begins with humanity, and that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who teach us the most. Daniel looked out at the crowd and felt something he had not felt in years: certainty. The certainty that even in a world obsessed with punctuality and profit, kindness still carried power. Now, before this story comes to a close, I have a special request. If you believe that doing the right thing always matters, no matter the cost, comment the words "a kindness wins" below. Let's see how many hearts still choose compassion over convenience. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone who chose to help when it would have been easier to walk away, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe for more stories that prove hope is not lost in this world. Your support keeps these messages alive because sometimes the greatest promotions in life don't come from titles or salaries. They come from the quiet moment on a rainy highway when you choose to stop. The applause that night echoed long after the lights dimmed and the guests went home. But for Daniel Mercer, the real change did not happen on the stage under the spotlight. It happened in the quiet mornings that followed, when he walked Lily to school without the knot of fear tightening in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't living on the edge of disaster. Yet transformation, he would soon learn, brings its own challenges. Stepping into the role of Director of Facilities Operations was not simply a promotion. It was a shift in identity. Just weeks earlier, he had been a man packing his belongings into a cardboard box, uncertain how to pay rent. Now he was attending executive meetings, reviewing budgets, and helping shape policies that affected thousands of employees. Some welcomed him warmly, others did not. Whispers traveled through hallways faster than official memos. Some believed he had manipulated his way into favor. Others assumed the CEO's gratitude had clouded her judgment. A few longtime managers quietly resented the sudden changes to long-standing policies, especially those who had prided themselves on rigid efficiency. Daniel felt the weight of those looks. He was not naive. He understood how corporations worked. Power shifts unsettled people, and his presence was a reminder that the old way, strict rules without context, had failed someone important. There were days he questioned whether he truly belonged in the executive conference room. Oh, the polished wood table, the digital dashboards on massive screens, the language of quarterly projections and operational metrics. It was a world far removed from tightening bolts and repairing broken systems. He had always been practical, hands-on, grounded. Now he was expected to think strategically. At night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat at their small kitchen table reviewing reports. He studied employee absentee data, analyzed scheduling patterns, and read case studies on corporate ethics. He refused to be a symbolic promotion. If he was going to sit in that chair, he would earn it. Meanwhile, the CEO, whose name the media rarely mentioned without admiration, faced her own storm. Investors began asking questions about the newly implemented employee support programs. Shareholders worried that increased flexibility might reduce productivity. Financial analysts scrutinized every policy revision, searching for signs of weakness. But the numbers told a different story. Within 3 months, employee retention improved. Sick leave misuse declined. Productivity stabilized, then climbed. Absenteeism related to burnout decreased significantly. Workers who once felt disposable now felt seen, and when people feel seen, they show up differently. Still, not everyone was convinced. One afternoon, Daniel received a report about a mid-level manager who had denied emergency leave to a single mother in accounting. The reason cited was insufficient documentation. It felt painfully familiar. Daniel requested a meeting. He didn't storm into the office with authority. He walked in with calm resolve. He reviewed the employee's performance record, which was nearly flawless. He examined the situation: a hospitalized child, an urgent surgery, no family nearby. The manager defended his decision by referencing policy clauses and fairness to other employees. Daniel listened fully before responding. He explained that fairness does not mean sameness. It means applying judgment with humanity. He reminded the manager that policies were tools, not weapons. He shared his own experience, not as leverage, but as perspective. The room fell silent. The emergency leave was approved. But more importantly, the manager later requested additional training on compassionate leadership. Change was not happening overnight, but it was happening. At home, Lily noticed subtle differences in her father. He smiled more. He attended her school events without constantly checking his phone. He even began volunteering once a month at a local community center, helping unemployed parents update resumes and practice interview skills. Word had spread about his story, and strangers sometimes approached him quietly, thanking him for reminding them to slow down and help when it mattered. One evening, nearly a year after the stormy highway encounter, Daniel received an invitation to visit the company's newest branch facility, a massive expansion project in another state. The CEO requested that he lead the inspection personally. It was a sign of trust. When he arrived at the construction site, hard hat secured and clipboard in hand, he saw more than steel beams and concrete floors. He saw opportunity. He ensured that employee wellness rooms were built into the design. He advocated for on-site childcare options in future planning. He insisted on safety standards that exceeded legal minimums. It wasn't about perfection. It was about intention. During the trip, he found himself reflecting on how close he had come to losing everything. If he had driven past that stranded car, if he had chosen punctuality over compassion, if fear had won, his life would look entirely different. One night in his hotel room, he called Lily before bed. She asked him the same question she often did when they talked about the future. Why did he stop that day? He thought about the simplest answer. Because someone needed help. Children understand truths that adults complicate. Back at headquarters, the CEO began including Daniel in higher-level strategic discussions. Not because he was a hero, but because he had become an anchor. Whenever conversations drifted toward purely financial motives, he asked a quiet question. How will this affect the people doing the work? That question began reshaping decisions before they hardened into policy. Over time, even skeptics began to respect him. Not out of fear or obligation, but because his consistency could not be ignored. He did not grandstand. He did not seek attention. He showed up early. He stayed late when necessary. He balanced spreadsheets with stories, metrics with meaning. Then came an unexpected test. An economic downturn hit the industry. Revenue projections dipped. Pressure mounted to reduce costs quickly. Layoffs were suggested in urgent meetings. It would be the fastest way to reassure investors. Daniel felt the old tension creeping back into the room. He saw how easily compassion could be labeled as expendable when profits tightened. He proposed an alternative. Instead of immediate layoffs, he suggested temporary executive pay reductions, voluntary reduced-hour programs, and cross-training employees to increase versatility. Woof. He presented data showing that long-term costs of mass layoffs, rehiring, retraining, loss of institutional knowledge, often outweighed short-term savings. The debate was intense. But the CEO supported the plan. The company avoided layoffs that quarter. Morale, instead of collapsing, strengthened. Employees saw leadership willing to share sacrifice rather than pass it downward. And when the market stabilized months later, the company emerged with loyalty that competitors lacked. Daniel realized then that the true ripple effect of one kind act extended far beyond a single promotion. It was influencing decisions that protected hundreds of families. On the second anniversary of that rainy morning, the CEO invited Daniel and Lily to a small private gathering. Not a corporate event, just a quiet dinner at her home. Her son, now a bright-eyed toddler, toddled across the living room floor. She watched him with a softness that success could never purchase. She told Daniel that every time she looked at her child, she thought about the thin line between tragedy and timing. She spoke of leadership as stewardship, not dominance. She admitted that before that day, she had believed efficiency alone built greatness. Now she understood that empathy sustained it. Daniel listened, humbled. He did not see himself as extraordinary. He saw himself as someone who had made a simple decision in a moment of choice. But sometimes simplicity carries extraordinary consequences. As years passed, Daniel's story became part of company culture. Not exaggerated, not mythologized, but remembered. New employees learned about the arraign policy, a phrase used internally to describe the importance of context in every decision. It became shorthand for slowing down and asking what someone might be going through before judging their performance. Lily grew older watching this unfold. She absorbed the lesson not from speeches, but from her father's actions. When a classmate was bullied, she stepped in. When a neighbor struggled with groceries, she helped carry them upstairs. Kindness had become her instinct, not her strategy. And Daniel, once terrified of losing everything, discovered that sometimes losing something forces the world to reveal what truly matters. He kept the cardboard box from the day he was fired. It sat in the back of his closet, flattened and worn. Not as a reminder of humiliation, but as proof of turning points. Whenever he faced a difficult decision, he thought back to that box and the storm and the fear. He chose courage. If you've stayed with this story until now, take a moment to reflect on a time when you had to choose between convenience and compassion. Those moments define us more than any title ever will. Before we close, here's something important. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that even small acts can echo into unimaginable change, please don't scroll away silently. Like this video, share it with someone who might be standing at their own crossroads, and subscribe so you never miss stories that restore faith in humanity. And in the comments, write "lie will stop if you promise to pause and help when someone needs you, even when it costs you something. Because somewhere on some road you haven't traveled yet, there may be a moment waiting for you. A flashing hazard light in the rain, a stranger in need, a decision that feels inconvenient. And that single decision might not only change their life, it might change yours forever.